Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hey everyone, this is Ask Rob and Rob, the show where you get your property questions in and we give you your property answers in return. We do this every week on a Tuesday and in the home section of the Sunday Times each and every Sunday. Make sure you check out our smiley faces there. But how is this show a thing? Well, it's because you get your questions in. So let's give you a reminder of how that happens.
It's oh so easy. Just go to propertyhub.net/ask. When you get there, you'll find that you can leave us a voice note directly from that page. You can find our phone number to give us a call, or you can submit a written question for our Sunday Times column. All of those in the same place at propertyhub.net/ask. And that is the process that Dan has followed today.
Hi, Rob and Rob. My name's Dan. I've been reading Rob's book since 2014, I think. So thanks for all the great content over the years. Apologies if this question's already been asked. I don't think I've ever heard it, but I was wondering about studio apartments. Are they worth considering? If the numbers stack up and they're in an area that you like and you're happy with, good prospects for capital growth and everything, are they worth considering, or are studio apartments not something you'd consider? Thanks.
Hey Dan, thank you for your question. And it's a really good one. I don't think we've answered a question like this for many years now. And hopefully my answer's consistent, and I'm sure somebody will go back and correct me if it's not. But I would tread carefully, is what I would say. I personally don't own any studio apartments. And if I was to own a studio apartment, it would probably only be in London. And it has to be in an area where the demand is just so strong, where people are just desperate to live, and normally you find that in a mega city. Now, I wouldn't completely rule it out in Manchester and Birmingham as well, but it would have to be of a very high standard. So why the reluctance? And the reluctance is, yes, there will be a buyer for it in the future, but I feel other people will also be reluctant. I think about the exit, even though I plan to hold for a long time on any property I purchase. Who will buy it from me? And less people will be inclined to buy a studio apartment. So I may have a market in London, I may have a market in Manchester and Birmingham, but am I going to have a market in a city that's got affordable property already, like Liverpool, for example? Probably not, because the difference between the price of a studio and a one bed in a location like Liverpool probably isn't a lot. So therefore, most people, understandably, would choose the one bed apartment. So I'm thinking about my capital growth prospects, and to have strong capital growth you need strong demand, and in most locations in the UK that isn't in place for studio apartments. So only in your biggest cities like Manchester, Birmingham and London would I consider it. However, if you are not in it for capital growth and you're just purely doing it for yield, then assess it on that basis. Look at the yield, and if it outperforms all other property types and that's all you care about, then crack on. But for me, I go for capital growth and use the bonus of yield, whereas I know some people listening will only focus on yield. There's no right or wrong way, it's just your personal preference. But whatever you do, Dan, good luck.
Okay, let's have a listen to our second question.
Hi, Rob and Rob. Big fan of the podcast and love that you guys expose interesting areas, and the talk of the silent crash is really valid. I agree largely what you're saying, but I'm not clear if you guys are missing a point, which in my mind makes it not as bad. Yeah, basically, so I agree that through inflation, the actual real value of property has fallen. However, and I think this will vary across the country, don't think that makes it necessarily a reduce in the price of property. As basically, if you look in real terms, the pound and the real what it can actually buy over the last couple of years is down about 40%. Basically, all the costs have inflated 40%. And yes, some people have had like 10% pay increases, but that even if you say that people have had a 10% increase, that still means that they're 30% down in buying power. If you look at property, typically the rents have gone up about 25%, 30%. But I still think on my calcs, that means that in real terms, we've taken a hit of about 15, 20%. And if you tally that in, I think in real terms, actual property prices are stagnant. I don't feel that they've really dropped because correspondingly, our incomes haven't gone up to counter. So I think property prices have dropped, but because of inflation, but our wages have dropped and haven't been increased in correspondence. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts and if you factored this in or not and where you think that's going to lead us. Thanks again. Thanks for listening and appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you for your question. And yeah, you make a really important point, which is that we often talk about property prices in real terms, so adjusted for inflation. And embedded in there is the assumption that wages largely keep up with inflation. Because the core idea is, if you have a property and all it does is go up in line with inflation, well, the mortgage you have against it is being eroded and you end up winning, even if property does nothing spectacular at all. But of course, for that mortgage to truly be devalued, you need it to be devalued relative to how you're going to be making those mortgage payments, how you're ultimately going to be paying it off. And that could be from rents and it could be from your wages. And rents, by and large, have been keeping pace with inflation. I don't have the data in front of me, but if you look at a trend line going back 15 years or so, you can see that they don't move exactly in line with each other. But over time, rents have largely kept up. And I think this is easy to miss because it doesn't happen all the time by clockwork every month. It can happen with a lag. It can not happen for ages and then they can suddenly surge and catch up. So a lot of the time it can look like rents aren't keeping up with inflation when in fact they are. The same is true for wages. And there seems to be a perception that wages aren't keeping pace with inflation. And of course, there will be many roles and sectors of the economy where they're not. But on the whole, they are. So I'm looking at a chart now showing that average UK wages today in real terms are pretty much exactly the same as they were back in 2008, very fractionally higher. And if you look at the period from 2019 to 2024, which is the kind of period when you'd expect that wages have been falling behind because inflation has been out of control for much of the time, in fact, wages have grown by an annualized 0.9%. Again, that's not going to be everyone's experience, but that is the average. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind because like I say, there is this belief that people on average are way behind. And don't get me wrong, it's not good. It's not good at all. Wages have gone virtually nowhere since 2008. That does not paint a happy picture for the UK economy. And if you believe that actual inflation that people experience is higher than the official numbers, which I think there's a good case for, then it means that people's living standards are getting worse. But in the context of the question, both rents and wages have kept pace. So thank you for the question, because that's allowed us to cover an aspect of this that I don't think we've ever done before. And that's only because you prompted us. And that is the wonderful thing about this show. So wonderful, in fact, that we're going to do it again next week. So remember, visit propertyhub.net/ask if you'd like to send your question our way. And we'll see you back here on Thursday for the Property Podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.